Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We might make a start. Welcome to the Georges River Local Planning Panel for the 17th of December 2019. We are the panel that have been appointed by the Council to determine specific development applications and to make recommendations in relation to planning proposals, including the development applications and the planning proposal which are on the agenda today. And we'll do so in accordance with the requirements of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act. My name is Paul Vagotis and I'm the chair of today's panel meeting. And with me today I have Mr. John Brockhoff, expert member to my right, Mr. Michael Levy, expert member to my immediate left, and to my far left we have Annette Rohotas, who is our community representative. I'm required to advise you that under the provisions of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, this panel meeting is being live streamed and will be made available on the Council's website. Everyone must ensure they speak into the microphone clearly, and when speaking at this meeting, members of the public should ensure their speech is respectful and appropriate. Any person using defamatory, discriminatory or offensive language may be exposed to liability for which this Council and this panel take no responsibility for. Any part of this meeting that is held in the closed session will not be recorded. The panel have received a completed assessment reports from the staff in relation to the 4 development applications and the planning proposal. The panel have undertaken inspections of all the sites and the localities of all 5 matters on the agenda today. We will deal with the 5 matters on the agenda in order as listed, being 296 Forest Road, Hurstville, 261 Princess Highway, Carlton, 1 to 3 English Street, Cogra, 23 Bay Road, Oatley, and then lastly the Ramsgate Village site, which is at 193 to 201 Rocky Point Road, 66 to 68 Ramsgate Road, and 2 to 6 Targo Road, Ramsgate. As required by the Local Planning Panel Code of Conduct, panel members are required to disclose any conflicts of interest in respect to all matters on the agenda today. The relevant forms as prescribed by the Department of Planning have been completed and are tabled for the Council to include in the minutes, and they're available for scrutiny by any member of the public, so they're right here if you'd want to have a look at those. 3 panel members have disclosed no conflicts of interest on any of the matters. Ms. Annette Rohotas has declared an interest in relation to 23 Bay Road, Oatley, and as such she will take no part in the hearing and consideration and decision making of this matter. As we progress through the matters on the agenda, only those persons who have been registered to speak prior to this meeting will be permitted to address the panel. Each person will be provided with 3 minutes to address the panel, but if you need longer time, as the chair, I have that discretion to allow that to happen. We'll hear from the objectors first, then from the applicant. I would ask those persons that are speaking to address the panel to come forward and sit in front of us and, as I said earlier, speak clearly into the microphone. Once we've heard all the various speakers who have been registered to speak for the particular matters, then we'll move to the next application. Members of the public are free to leave after they've dealt with their matter. Once we've heard from all the submitters who've registered to speak on each of the applications, we will then adjourn to deliberate on each of the matters and make decisions which will be published on the Council's website. Can I ask all those persons with a mobile phone, can you please either turn them on silent or off? And we'll move to the first item, which is the DA for 296 Forest Road, Hurstville. No one has registered to speak, so in relation to that matter, so a decision will be taken by the panel later today and published on the Council's website. Moving to the second item on the agenda, which is 261 Princess Highway, Carlton, which is the demolition of the existing building, consolidation, tree removal and construction of a 5-storey shop-top housing, including 2 levels of basement car parking. We have 1 person registered to speak in relation to the applicant, and that is George Batsakis. Mr. Batsakis, are you on? Please come forward, sir. Now you're from 92 Melrose Street, North Melbourne.
Yes. Greetings from Melbourne.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
What I'd like to inform the panel of is that my client purchased this property and settled in the early part of the year and inherited this application that was afoot. I have been engaged by the owner to work on this application and to see hopefully a successful outcome, whether it's in the next few weeks or when the decision is made or over a greater period of time. I am a little bit disgruntled, but I won't get bogged down on that today. It appears to me that the officer's report is pretty much the assessment and a refusal decision to be put to the panel all in one. And I, or the owner, and having heard from the architect, who is maybe a little bit familiar with some of the issues, also tells me that there are quite a few new issues that have been raised as part of this report. This report was provided to me on Thursday. I've flown up and I've done my best to look at the key issues and the conclusions that have been put to the panel. And it might be best if I can just go through some of those on a dot point by dot point basis, without getting overwhelmingly bogged down on the minutiae of some of the issues that have been raised. I've gone to page number 90, paragraph 118, and
All
some
right,
of the...
bear with us and we'll pull it up.
Yep, page 90,
yep.
Paragraph 116, and 116 really rolls into 118. I've done a bit of research on the property, maybe going back as far as the 1950s. It was a BP petrol station site. Prior to that, I think it was some sort of heavy timber yard, maybe doing some work for the docks and so forth.
It was actually one of those timber yards that sold fencing.
Prior to...
Yeah, it had CCA fencing, okay. Coppers logs, all that sort of
yes.
timber.
And I think in the later years it's just a typical merchant timber yard, but in between the BP petrol station site and the merchant timber yard, there was a car showroom there. It appears that council, the previous council, has always had difficulty with the property. At one point in time, I think the mayor has written to the planning minister and saying, what do we do about this particular site, particularly at a time when Pizza Hut were trying to put a store there. Regardless, council's made a decision to increase the amount of built form that can occur on this property and a string of properties all along the Princes Highway. Mm-hmm. One of the points that the officer mentions here is that the ratio between commercial space and residential space doesn't hit the appropriate criteria. There seems to be a variance of around about 2.9%. I think we're getting bogged down on very small things here, and I think what hasn't been taken into account is that the commercial space has been cut back a little bit on the ground floor as part of a revision of the ground floor to create some external cafe areas on the footpath. If you dovetail that area with the actual internal floor space, the percentages begin to correct themselves. Regardless, and I think that's a very important thing in the sense of making the pedestrian environment a hell of a lot more friendly. If we had the opportunity to talk about the urban design issues there and trying to get the balance right, I'm quite sure that this particular aspect of the project, regardless of the metrics, can be kicked into shape. Bullet point number 2 in paragraph 118 is pretty much building off the same argument. There is no doubt, bullet point number 3, that the transition is occurring in this particular area, and that while this particular application seems to, in reading the past reports, whether it's the traffic report or the environmental report, seems to be focused on bulky goods. The B6 zone does talk about a variety of commercial uses. Bulk goods is one of them. And the reason why I pick up on that is that the officer's report comes back to the rigid truck vehicle that enters and exits the site. Now, notwithstanding that this particular little neighbourhood has always had large vehicles going in and out, depending on that final use, and I use the word commercial broadly here, if the right type of commercial use is to be put onto that ground floor, we can alleviate the larger vehicle that might need to service the site. So I'm quite sure there are an enormous amount of businesses, and notwithstanding if we were to say a commercial office use, and get rid of the rigid truck altogether. I can't advise the panel at this point in time whether the client has got his head around the whole idea of the bulky good truck matter. All I'm saying is, at this point in time, there is the opportunity, if council saw that that truck should not be in that particular street, that the commercial use can survive and it can be serviced. Notwithstanding that, if a decision was to be made to get rid of the truck altogether, therefore implying that a smaller commercial vehicle can service the site, then that can be taken off the street and maybe put into the basement car park as a way of getting goods or furniture or any other type of item up onto the ground floor. So I think that particular aspect of the project can be addressed and resolved. The officer's report does pick a little bit on that northwestern corner of the site, saying it's a bit congested with doors, it's not friendly to the pedestrian environment. It's a very hard call, this one, because that's probably the most appropriate spot to put the fire escape doors. Some of these can be consolidated. Matters such as switchboards and other type of items, they are sitting above the flood zone, and they can all be accommodated. I think it's just a question of subjective assessment here rather than an overwhelming failure to resolve these sorts of issues. That particular part of the building, while I'm focused on that northwestern corner, seems to suggest and asks the removal of tree 7. Tree 7 and all those trees along the back boundary are part of previous landscape plans, particularly with the timber merchant yard. I'm not, if I sort of tongue-in-cheek suggest that it's not an ancient tree, it's probably 25 to 30 years old. I'm quite sure that it can be replaced with much better landscaping, considering that there are several hundred square metres of space up on the roof of the retail and commercial use. There would be no net loss, I think, to landscape environs on the corner, and in particular to this particular development. Having said that, and having gone out there this afternoon, a large portion of those tree canopies are hanging over the other side of the boundary, and I'm puzzled a little bit why the neighbour there isn't complaining about it, considering that the gum trees do drop branches. Ceiling heights, things of this nature. The ground floor has been raised. I'm not sure which version of the drawings the officer may have had available to him. The ground floor is sitting at around about 3.3 in a revision C set of the drawings which have been made available to me. I do see the point about the flexibility that could be afforded to the first floor apartments. We have plenty of roof space underneath or roofscape space to the 21 metres. If we were required to inject another 600 millimetres of ceiling space into the first floor, I'm quite sure it can be accommodated. It's just a question of stretching the building upwards. I think I'll just come back to really the big ticket item here, which the report seems to leverage itself off, which is the overland flow. My understanding is that this whole area in the 1 in 100 year is underwater. This particular building, by way of hydraulic engineers and flood level engineers, has suggested that the way that we can minimise increasing the velocity of water and increasing the height of the flood level is by providing a culvert through the building. Now, the trick here is getting the right proportions of this culvert to make sure that there's no net increase. Due to the rush, we were given around about in October 2 days to submit the report. We had been working on it a little bit earlier, but the Cardno engineers did prepare quite a reasonable and thorough report. And based on the modelling that was done at the time, there would be a small net increase of around about 30 millimetres. Now, if we increase ever so slightly some of the sizes of these culverts, I'm quite sure that we would achieve the benchmark that we're looking for. Now, notwithstanding that, the report talks about water cascading down onto the footpath. That's not the case. You've got to remember that the footpath is underwater while the water is flowing through the culvert. So it's not the culvert that's creating the flooding. The flooding is actually happening way uphill. And the culverts are really just simply not attempting to increase the height of the flood level. Having said that, to some particular degree, the officer's report, the engineer's report, and I sort of flash back here to page 87. At the top of the report, the objective, of course, is that we're not looking to significantly adversely affect the flood behaviour in pushing the flood flow. I don't think we're significantly adversely, and having said that, not having had the opportunity to look at the assessment or the officer's assessment just by way of time, I'm quite sure we can get the right outcome. Now, the first two paragraphs there, in a nutshell, are basically saying that you've got to get the building up off the ground and let the water flow between the ground and the underside of the ground floor slab. In the extreme, it's probably suggesting that the building needs to be built on stilts. I don't think that's a sort of a solution that anyone would be looking for. But having said that, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bullet point off the bottom pretty much comes, it's using different words, but it's pretty much coming to the conclusion of the culvert design anyway. The openings to the perimeter walls at subfloor level is to be maximised to minimise the impact of the proposal on the loss of flood storage and alterations to the flood behaviour. So we're all heading in the right direction. It's just nuances here and timing in order to be able to resolve some of these issues. There are some other matters that the report does talk about. I won't get bogged down on those because I think they're quite easily resolved, which has got to do with snorkel effects to particular bedrooms. I think there are 3 apartments out of 30 odd apartments or 33 odd apartments that may need a little bit more attention. But overall, the design of the building, this is not my view, it seems to be the view of various committees that have had a look at this, they do give this building proposal a bit of a tick. It is a contribution to the neighbourhood there. It's just a question of getting what's happening on the ground floor and at street level right. The report does play it up. I've never read a report of this type where it's attempting to blow the development up. I don't think we're worlds apart, and on that basis I think we can successfully resolve a hell of a lot of these issues without changing the form of the building or requiring to go back to advertising and putting the project back on public notice. It's just a question of being afforded the time. So I come here today respectfully asking for the committee and the panel to defer a decision. We are in the middle of Christmas. Most people are away in January, and we can probably get a lot of these issues in this assessment report fully addressed close to ticking all the boxes, I would have thought, unlike some of the other applications that are across the road and the one further up at Jubilee, which are probably further away in terms of compliance than what this particular project is. I wish I could give you a figure, but I think it would be fair to say, having read the officers' reports for those two other applications, ones which may have been refused last week, they're worlds apart. So I think we're very close, and hopefully if the panel can indulge me and make a decision in favour of giving us the opportunity to address these and prepare a design and finish off a design for a building which may be really worthwhile for the Princess Highway environment.
That's your submission?
That's about it.
Okay. If the panel was minded to defer this application and provide you or afford you with the opportunity to redesign some elements of it and certainly address the, using your words, the big ticket item, flooding.
Yep.
What sort of time frame are we looking at here? How long do you need? 2 months?
The author of the report is not back until mid 20th, the 24th of January. So I would say, unless I can get someone else in that particular office to pick up and run with it, would be looking late February, early March. That's probably a realistic time frame.
The panel looked at this site quite extensively, so we've had a good walk around and we're aware of the site. So, and we certainly hear what you're saying. I'll open it up to questions in a moment, but my view is I think this is a meritorious building. I mean, I think your design is getting there, and I agree with the points that you've raised, that there are some minor things that you could address and possibly achieve an outcome that's more desirable than what we want to see. But I mean, I appreciate that you've had, it's only recent carriage of this matter. Would that be fair to say? Only recent carriage of this yourself, your involvement?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now, I'm not being an architect myself. I am going to kick this into shape by way of using the consultant team that is already on the project. So we're not reinventing the wheel, taking the project back to Melbourne. And so we're working in conjunction. I mean, there's been a lot invested already in intellectual investment rather than dollars, because we are just recent purchases of the
Well, I understand this application's been in for near on 2 years,
Yeah.
so it's coming up for its second birthday.
Yeah, and my understanding is that it's been dragged out, and we're at the suffering end of this, having made certain discoveries. I think the previous owner was suffering financially, and that's one of the reasons why we bought the site, or the owner did buy the site. And as a result of those particular problems with that particular owner, it just got dragged out.
Okay. All right, I'll see if there are any further questions.
No. Yes. Just wondering if you could explain to us how the culvert system works. It seems to be floating in the air. Is it a suspended structure?
Just think of it as a concrete tube. It's a concrete pipe, but effectively it is a structural pipe, as in it's embedded and tied into the concrete floor of the ground floor. So
on the underside? On
the underside. So it's sitting as part of the ceiling of the basement car park. So it's hanging off that. Now, that first basement level has been provided a certain additional height, which is maybe atypical, because most people want to get down to 2.4, 2.1 metres to get typical passenger vehicles in there. So this particular basement level is slightly higher. I think as part of a previous submission, this solution must have been foreshadowed. So therefore the height was put in. What was always going to be a question is, what is the width of the culvert? About a month or so ago when I got on board, the culvert was two culverts were sitting at around about 3 metres. In order to meet the flood level matters, they got widened out to 5.2. Now, in the end, they might end up being 5.3, 5.4 wide. At the back of the property, on the western side, they're basically sitting just slightly higher. We're talking millimetres here, an inch or so higher than ground level or the garden level. And as the water collects at the back of the building, while it's also going down a cold street, it'll come through the culverts and make its way out onto the Princes Highway.
So are you saying, and I appreciate you're not the hydraulic engineer, that there wouldn't be any circumstances where water would be discharged onto the footpath and the highway, because you're saying that area would already be underwater?
Correct. The idea is to minimise the flow of that water, the velocity of that water coming through the building. So the wider the culvert, the assumption is the speed will be reduced. So, yes, and it's a bit tricky because aspects of the report read in such a way where one is led to believe that the culvert should actually drain into a drain. That's not going to work. I mean, the whole of the land is flooded. So we can't put, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of square metres of land that's covered with water into some sort of pipe. It's just not logical. It's not practical. So, yeah, all this is really about is minimising speed and influencing the overland flow in gaining height. So we're just trying to keep it at the height that we're aiming to keep it at.
All right. Yeah.
So you just mentioned that the latest design has the culverts at about 5.2 metre width, because our drawings show it as the 3 metre width still. So.
Yes, there was a submission that was made to council on the 3rd of October. I do have a set of drawings here with me if you just want to have a quick look at it.
That's okay. We'll just make a note of it. Thank you. Assuming a culvert design would work for the hydraulic perspective, currently there's bin stores and so forth at the higher end of the site.
Yes.
That would clearly encumber any water movement. What could be a solution to remove those from that area?
Look, if the architects were here, my brief to them would be to take those bins inside. Simple. Yeah. It's good for everybody.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. It does cause any impact.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing me today.
Our pleasure. A decision will be taken later today and published on the council's website.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes item 2 on the agenda. Moving to item 3, which is 1 to 3 English Street, Cogra. We have one registered speaker, which is Amaria Abdullah. Is that correct?
Marianne.
Marianne, I'm sorry. Please come forward, ma'am. You mentioned your architect couldn't make it.
No, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, I'm a bit unprepared because I only just found out he couldn't make it. And when I spoke to council, yes, sorry.
Just bring it over.
Okay, yeah. Don't want to break it. Yeah, when I spoke to council a couple of days ago, they told me they were sending all the items to him. So I did try and find out what this meeting was about, and I apologise that I'm not prepared. And then when I found out the architect wasn't coming, I don't have any of the details that he sent to them. But I just wanted to explain to you the process that we've gone through. And I understand at the last design review panel, there were some changes that were suggested that we make. And actually the property is owned by myself and my brother. We're not property developers at all. We're just looking to secure our retirement later on, and we put all our money into these 2 properties. Anyway, so the reason why I wanted to talk to you, when we went to the last design review panel, they did suggest some changes. However, my brother spoke to a town planner not long after, and he mentioned, and his name was Martin Southwell, I think, and he mentioned to John that he would take a look at the the suggestions made by the design review panel and come back to him by November and let him know, what are the things that would be acceptable by council, what we needed to do to get it across the line. Unfortunately, he didn't come back to John, which prompted me to write a letter to the council, because we've had this in for over a year and a half now. Into this application, and we initially started our application to develop number 1 English Street back in 2013-14, and we were, before we started that, we were advised that it would be good if we could purchase one of the 2 properties on either side. So we ended up purchasing the property at number 3 at way above market price, but we purchased it thinking that we would get our development through. So the first one was rejected for number 1. So then we decided, okay, we'll get number 1 and number 3, and that wouldn't isolate number 3, English Street, and we would put some plans together and submit them. And so that's when we submitted them last year in around August.
Have you had an opportunity to read this report?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I rang even on Friday, I rang the council and no one came back to me, and I rang this morning and I asked him to give me the information.
Who's?
The person's name was Michael from the council, and he said he was away last week, and so that's why he didn't get back to me.
Okay, you're aware that these are available online to read?
Yes, I didn't know that either.
Okay.
No one told me anything, I'm sorry.
This report is recommending a refusal of your application.
Recommending?
Refusal.
Oh, refusal. I didn't know that.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stand you down for at least 10 minutes so you can read this report.
All right.
Because it might be a good idea that you inform yourself as to what's been recommended, because that might inform the way you come back and address us.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
these issues.
had no idea. Okay.
Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you my copy of the report.
Thank you.
And you can read that,
Thank you.
and then I'll call you back.
All right.
Right? It might be fairer on you, and then you'll have an understanding as to what we're doing.
Okay, that
All
would
right.
be great. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
So we'll just we'll stand that matter down. We'll move to the 4th matter on the paper, which is 23 Bay Road, Oatley, and we do have a conflict of interest declaration. So Annette, I could ask you to vacate the chamber. And we have one speaker, Mr. Karaman. Please come forward, ma'am. Can't hear you there. Are you going to address us?
So I'm the owner.
Right.
Mr. Karaman is my brother-in-law, who's a town planner. He's assisted with the application. He's not present at the moment, but I can, if I'm not.
Would you like to address us?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, and your name is?
Zena Musa.
Sorry?
Zena Musa.
I might get you to write that
Yeah, sure.
for me. For the record.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problems.
All right, just speak clearly into the microphone. The floor is all yours.
Just basically, our application was submitted to council. I believe it was for recommendation for a driveway and a few modifications for lot 23 of 23 Bay Road, Oatley.
Yes?
So we're hoping it's for approval.
Have you read this report?
Yes, I have.
Okay. And do you have any comments in relation to it?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right. So that's your submission? You have nothing further to add?
Nothing
Okay, I'll
further.
just see if there's any questions.
Oh, look, I just do have one. The shared driveway as approved, I understand that was understood as workable in the original application. Do you have any comments on the workability of the shared driveway?
I don't believe it was workable, to be honest, in the original DA. I do believe from my point of view, it was kind of like a forced kind of thing we had to do, and then and even from as we progressed with the build, it just didn't make any sense of having the vehicle come in the way it was set, and also from a safety perspective of having children, as if a car was there, having children wanting to play in the driveway. Imagine having a basketball ring or kids running in a bike and having that rock there. It's just not physically like it didn't look safe, wasn't safe. I wouldn't feel comfortable having my child playing out there. So I don't think it was a safe option to do. I think it's safer having the two driveways set separately for a vehicle, for cars and for children. So I don't think the first DA was the right position to be approved in the first place.
I have another question, but I might wait for others.
I've got a related question with the driveway.
Yes, as to why. You go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Thanks.
Nice.
I can see with the approved arrangement, cars go in and out in a forward direction because of the manoeuvring, but wouldn't it be the case under the driveway, as you're now suggesting it, that a car would actually need to reverse the entire way down the driveway and onto the street?
Sorry, do you mean in the first?
So sorry, no, what you're proposing now, so with the new driveway, and you were talking about concerns with children on the driveway, but wouldn't it be under what you're now proposing that you actually need to reverse the whole way down to the street to get out of your garage?
You would have to, so in lot 23, you would, yes, but what would you, so if you're in lot 23, you would have to, yes, you would have to reverse, but you would not have to kind of do like a 3-point turn.
It's just a straight.
It's just a straight,
Reverse
it's a straight,
down the
yes,
street.
it's a straight reverse down the street. It's not in, out, prancing around.
Sorry, that was all.
No, I have another question. The shared driveway was originally, one of the reasons the shared driveway was proposed was because of the amenity provided by the rock outcrop and the trees between the second dwelling and the street. The proposed additional driveway would affect obviously that the rock outcrop and the tree, and would expose the visual bulk of the second dwelling from the street to a greater degree. Is there anything that's proposed that, I guess, addresses the loss of amenity from the removal of the rock outcrop and that tree in the modification proposal?
You mean from?
Well, you're going to lose the rock and the tree. Is there anything in the modification that puts that right?
From a public interest point of view, the tree and the rock are quite important
Well,
because they add to the amenity and the character of the street.
well, if you look at the we love the character, the whole of where we are. So the bottom part of the whole, the bottom 2 levels of the house is actually covered in rock to keep the character of the street and of the whole look. So we don't, even though a bit of a part of the rock is removed, the whole bottom, the aspect of the 2 houses is covered in beautiful, in rock looking and trees to keep the character and the aesthetic look of the street. And obviously once finished, there will be new trees that will be planted and landscape to continue the beautiful location we are in. We're not planning on ripping it and putting a whole slabbing concrete everywhere. That's the whole point, is to keep that atmosphere and the surrounding of where we are. That's why two levels of the house is being covered with rock to keep that look of where we are.
Thank you.
This is the landscape detail we've got and then finished detail here.
Yeah, so the two levels of the bottom of will be covered with rock.
No, we understand from the material schedule that's been provided what's going where. Thank you, sir. And then this treatment here. All right, okay. Nothing further? No.
I do apologise, I'm just the resident. I mean, I wish I could provide you more. My architects, everyone's away on holidays. Everyone's on holidays at the moment.
Okay, thank you. That's your submission. The decision will be taken later today and published on the council's website.
No problems.
Thank you. Have you had an opportunity to read the report?
I've read the beginning of it.
Okay, keep going. We've still got another matter we can deal with. Okay. Turning to the fifth matter on the agenda, which is the planning proposal for the Ramsgate Village. And we've got a number of speakers here. Hayden Bennett, Peter Inglebright, Samir Takuk, and Ben Craig from Ethos Planning, Kerry Kiriakou and Rob Burton. So we've got 6 people speaking. Who'd like to come up first? Top down, Hayden Bennett. Right, sorry. Well, we don't have anyone speaking against your proposal. So,
yes, President.
please come forward, sir. Well, you're the first person on the list.
Right. Well,
Sorry?
We've lost Annette.
Oh, sorry, Annette. Oh, yes, we have. That's right. We've lost a panel member. That's a worry.
And when the time comes to, you might just want to spin the microphone.
better.
Sorry, Annette, I do apologise for not calling you back. We inadvertently thought you were there.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, panel. That's fine. So, by way of introduction, my name's Hayden Bennett. I own and run a real estate business called Commercial Property Group. I'm here in the capacity of purely a supporter in what's proposed here for 193 to 201 Rocky Point Road. So I don't know a lot about the details in the applicant. I just wanted to talk more about, I suppose, supporting the application in terms of what the area needs. I've worked along Rocky Point Road. I own 2 buildings on Rocky Point Road. We've recently renovated one. I've worked along that strip for 10 years and I've seen some changes in that strip, both negatively and positively. I think more recently positively, with some really good businesses coming into the area. Where my office was in the Darrell League chocolate site, if you guys are familiar with that. It's been developed by JQZ. I was in that building for 10 years. I was basically the only occupant in that building. It was formerly occupied by Harvey Norman. And behind that building, 550 apartments have been built. In that development, there is no amenity. So we've got 550 units and nowhere for the residents to shop. I was there, like every time my staff wanted to go to lunch, you'd have to get in the car and obviously drive up to Ramsgate Village or Beach. So in terms of the support that I see here with obviously the proposal put forward by Capitol Hill for 193 Rocky Point Road, is I really feel it will activate and rejuvenate the dilapidated older buildings in the area. We lease and we sell along Rocky Point Road. We're probably the most active agent along that strip. We've seen some great businesses that have come to the area. And if we look at that herd mentality, good businesses attract good businesses. I really feel with what is proposed here with Coles coming into the area as well, it's going to be a major anchor. And not only, there's going to be 561 car spaces, 197 units and over 6,000 metres of commercial retail space. Being a commercial industrial agent, all I've seen lately, particularly the last 5 years, is all my commercial industrial real estate being rezoned for residential development, and the lack or lack of vision for good quality commercial premises, whether it be retail or commercial. I feel there's been a lot of effort and thought put into this plan, whether we call it an urban plan or whatever it may be. You've got, as I said, residents back up there at the JQZ development. Where are they going to shop? Where are they going to eat? I don't think there's a good enough facility in Cogra CBD. We've got Ramsgate Beach, which has recently undergone some changes with some parking. My view is Ramsgate Beach struggles more on a retail front than Rocky Point Road. Rocky Point Road, the retail businesses there do better. There is more demand for Rocky Point Road than Ramsgate Beach. That's sort of my supporting figures around it. I'm open to questions if you have any.
I don't.
No.
There you go.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Next submitter, Peter Engelbreit. Please come forward, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson and panel. I'm here representing, well, I suppose I'm here to support the planning proposal, but I work for Coles Group Property. And essentially, I just want to address, I suppose, two points in the planning proposal. One being the current zoning split. The proposal is asking for the whole site to be Zone B2, and I think the main reason for that is being Coles. We've got a certain box, specified box that we need to put a supermarket in, and even though there is currently B2 zoning on the site, to fit a box in that shape just doesn't make it feasible. Coles moves into an area for 20, 30, 40 years, as can be seen with the current Ramsgate Beach store that's been there for almost 40 years. And essentially, we see this as opportunity to, see the growth of Ramsgate in the next 40 years, having a full-line supermarket in the area to serve the area. Second point being
So what happens to the Coles Ramsgate Beach store?
My next point, thank you. So essentially, we've got tenure there until 2033. Yeah. We've tried to acquire the site from our landlord to basically, because we've been looking for a while in the area to secure a full-line supermarket. Yeah. A couple of years back, we're trying to think outside the box, thinking we should actually try and acquire the site from our current landlord and try and fill a full-line store in it. The biggest problem with that is the landlord doesn't want to sell. The second problem is the water table is less than 3 meters. So if you were to do to the north of our current store, there was a new development, I think, with about 4 to 6 levels of apartments, yeah, with a couple of retail tenancies on the ground floor and parking behind it.
Yeah, behind the Shell garage.
That's right, yes, behind the Shell garage. Essentially what the problem would be is if you were to do something similar on the site, which is probably the highest and best use, is mixed use development. Yeah. One level of car park in the basement wouldn't support a supermarket and residential above. So we've got a bit of tenure risk at our current Ramsgate Beach store.
Surely the floor plate from a redeveloped site down at Ramsgate wouldn't be any bigger, would it?
Essentially, so currently the store is about 2,000 square meters. If you add the car park, which forms part of the lot, yeah, you'll probably get close to 3,500 or to 4,000 square meters. The problem is the car parking ratio.
Yeah. So to be assumed that whole, where the car park is, the surface car park of the Ramsgate Beach store would be supermarket?
Well, essentially it would be supermarket and rest of the build form.
Okay.
So we've got tenure risk there. Highest and best use is mixed use development, residential and retail, okay, with minimal parking. And we see this as a really good opportunity to be more central to the Ramsgate, I suppose, area, yeah, service the area and service the customers. Okay.
That's your submission?
That's my 2 cents.
No questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Our next submitter, Samir Taouk.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm Samir Taouk, known as Musa as well. I'm the owner of Capitol Hill Group and running this project. Also a local, probably 35 years, grown up in the area in Targo Road. one of the houses is actually our family home.
Right.
So I've sort of seen and the area and know what it, what it needs. And we originally were doing we owned the corner block on 193 to 195 and my father's house, which is number 2. So originally we were lodging a DA, compliant DA, to do just shop top housing for whatever was permissible. So we went to council back in early 2015 when it was COGRA and put it forward, and they said, well, what about your neighbours, well, maybe, that you don't want to impact them. Neighbours were old, they were happy to sell to us, and they said, well, we want to try and put a supermarket in the area because there was supposed to be one across the road. So we looked at it and we thought, what, the area does need this. So meetings back and forth with council, and then I think in 2016 they suggested maybe you take a bit more along Rocky Point Road for a better planning outcome. So we assessed it and started something that was supposed to be, but being a local and in the area, I knew what it needed and I knew that what would work there, and it was just, the area was just so thirsty, that whole strip there, so it needed a bit of life, it needed something, an investment. It's never had an investment, it's just sort of like a drive-by, people don't need to stop. So this is where we got to today. But another thing, there's a lot of units coming up, like the Darrelly, that also are struggling. They have to, like, Darrelly is walking distance to our project.
Yeah.
250 metres exactly. So it's also a benefit for them because I think they don't have to drive and get in their cars or just walk up, do their shopping, walk back. Another thing we noticed, the elderly, there was a lot of interest from the elderly people in the local community in downsizing. We got a lot of interest when we're doing just doing our studies from local agents and that. Only because the facilities that we're going to put in the project, like the medical centre, the Coles, the cafes, the whole open village square. It was just convenient. We noticed for them that a lot of them had the interest of downsizing and putting a bit of money in the bank, and we don't have to be as mobile. Another thing is the whole strip is a bit outdated. A lot of the awnings and the shops, and we own a few shops along there. I mean, I don't think it's feasible for anyone to go and put an investment and redo their awnings and their shops unless they give them 12 months rent free. So I think this will bring in that energy and get rid of the thirst in that whole area there. Another thing is parking. A lot of developments there, shop top housing, there's not enough parking for them, the ones that have their shops. So they're using our parking currently there, which I've left open for them because it's not feasible. But if you see on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it's just absolutely crazy. They're parking down at the golf course. So that's why when we were designing this, we pushed for more parking so the other retail can benefit from that as well. And that's just been a journey, and hopefully you can see. Thank you.
All right, I'll just see if there's any questions.
No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Craig, Ben Craig from Ethos. Last? Yes. Okay. So, Kiriakou?
Hi, thanks for hearing me. My name's Kerry Kiriakou. I have an accountancy practice situated on Rocky Point Road. I'm in support of this project because the area needs a lift. Just recently, one of the banks have closed, and if the other bank closes, Commonwealth Bank, well, the place is going to become like a business just going to walk away. The other biggest problem that we have for our staff is parking is a big problem. Some of my casuals that come into my office have to park down near the golf course. There's no street parking available anywhere.
Whereabouts is your accountancy practice?
Right next door.
Next to George Lounge? Is that where you are?
No, I'm across the road where the main building is, where the development is, on Rocky Point Road, on 187. Shop
You're
2,
on the
187.
Bayside Council side?
No.
Where
No,
are you?
on Targo, across the road on Targo Street.
Oh, okay.
Just off Targo Street.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And the other thing is to go and buy some milk or bread for the office. Sometimes we've got to travel down to the Southgate, or we go to the Superbarn store. We don't travel to Cogger because we can't find parking anywhere.
Yeah.
And no offence to my mate who just spoke about Coles, parking down there is terrible. So none of my staff that go down there anyway. So I believe a development like this is going to improve the area and give it a lift. And my biggest concern, if Commonwealth Bank goes away, the place is just going to become dead.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for hearing me.
I'll just see if there's any questions. John?
No.
Annette?
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Rob Burton. Now, Mr. Burton, who are you representing?
I'm from Turner, representing the owner's architect.
Right, okay.
And I,
Okay, Mr. Craig, can you also come up as well? I think it's good that we have both the architect and the planner together, if that's okay with you. If you have a colleague with you, that's fine, you can come up.
If we need him for technical matters. I'll let Rob speak first and then.
okay. Well, thanks for your time. I'd just like the opportunity just to run through some of the key aspects of the proposal.
I take it you're familiar with what's being recommended.
Yeah. But I just wanted to start following on from the previous submissions that our starting point was really to see this as a key placemaking exercise to give a real centre and heart to Ramsgate. And so part of that was to start by looking at the benefit of providing a new public domain or town centre as a
Revitalisation of an area that's pretty sad.
Exactly. So part of that placemaking exercise was to really start with a square or a public square. So that was part of the original design exercise as part of the planning proposal. And part of that, we have done a number of studies comparing successful urban squares within Sydney as a comparison. And as you can see, our contribution is actually per site area is better than probably most comparable projects that we've seen in Sydney.
That's to scale.
That's to scale. So each of these are to scale in terms of public domain. So with, for example, recent DY, Camaret, St Margaret's, which are finer grain developments, even to Central Park in Broadway. So what we see is that obviously it's not at the scale of Central Park, and it's not necessarily at the fine grain of some of these other centres, and it's somewhere in between. But what that shows is that actually its size is comparable and probably, if not better.
Do you have a comparison against these now? I mean, in other words, have you got an area size?
Yeah, so in the report, I can go through that. We can show how that stacks up.
Refresh the panel's memory on that.
So starting with our site, the square is orientated primarily in a north-south orientation, as you can see that most of the successful squares do for best solar orientation, opening up to the north. with buildings arranged on the Rocky Point roadside, so that it creates contained, however, completely engaged public space with network connections that line up with the existing surrounding street and pedestrian connections. And each edge offers up the benefit of fully active uses on all of those fronts. Part of the benefit of that location of that public domain is also to buffer from the noise, so that it has a degree of amenity protection from Rocky Point Road. I can talk about that in a little bit more detail further on. But if, in comparison, a study with each of the projects illustrated to show, so we've compared dimension sizes with our proposal to recent projects in Sydney. So, for example, DY, similar that it opens up to the north to a street where you have a landscape buffer and again active edges and lane connections to street network. Camaray, again, similar, where it's centralised square, which is controlled, however, has very good interfaces with the street connection, so it's not overtly enclosed or perceived to be privatised. So it has that public engagement and feeling.
Just in what we worked out, so open space area of the square at Randstad, 3,150 square metres. Camaray, 2,200. DY, 2,480. So again, 3,150 square metres open space.
So I might flip to another equivalent. So some of these are also, so here, for example, in the rocks, again, that's more public space, but again, we're showing examples of successful convivial spaces that are large enough that hold events, markets, and the like. So again,
That's probably not a comparable, that one.
No, it's a bit different shape.
Different shape.
The space is 2,600.
Yeah, and I think the passing trade too is a bit different.
Yeah.
Where it is a tourist destination.
Yeah.
So Liberty Place in the CBD, where the ANZ Bank is, again has through site connections and lots of convivial use, but are very compact and obviously with.
The point we're trying to make is that the amount of public open space is a sizable public open space. It's not an open stick offer. It's actually a really step change, a size of open space that would enable markets, enable community gatherings, that sort of thing to take place.
Yeah. And even on the other end of the scale, for example, in Bondi, the lane development where it's incredibly successful and active for the local business and the local community. Yep. So that was just a few illustrations of.
Thank you.
And so part of that public domain network, as I say, is connected back to the streets. Part of the illustrative proposal that we've put forward with this planning proposal is to take into account adjoining property, so that we've assessed the block as a whole, so that the adjoining site and also the nearby heritage properties have the ability to engage with that public domain and actually revitalise the use of those existing heritage buildings, which are probably again need a boost and potentially turn their aspect from a busy southern facing street onto a north facing public domain, so that pretty much every edge and space of that area is active and convivial. Part of the designs we've shown how the Coles supermarket is entered, and it's primarily centred into the heart of that public domain, so that we ensure that there's enough throughput through that space and a reason to engage with that space. We've placed some deep soil planting and trees on the northern edge to create a softer landscape buffer onto Targo Road, which provides some shelter from the sun. We've also got provision for additional street trees along Targo Road, Rocky Point Road, and a few on Ramsgate Road within our frontage. And the ability to formalise some on-street parking, and also the ability to contribute some public or active public art to engage and liven up the space, as well as obviously the commercial uses and some community uses that will be on the ground floor. The overall massing of the development is an increase over the prescribed LEP heights. However, much attention has been taken into the transition to the heritage on the southern corner of the site, but also the existing housing on the western edge, which are currently townhouses. This site is zoned R3 currently, so has the ability to develop as a 4-storey development under the current controls. And as this diagram shows, that we are reflecting that scale change down to essentially a 4-storey edge on a single level podium, which is very similar to the 6-storey development on the opposite side of Targo Road, which steps down from 6 to 4 on the existing residential boundary. And again, the height essentially has been placed on the northeast corner of the development to sort of create a bit of a civic marker, which signposts the entrance to that public square, and then transition that height down to the heritage buildings.
The important thing also is the 10th story here is a much smaller floor plan, so it's been deliberately designed to be very recessive, almost invisible from view when you're going along the street. So when you're driving on the street, largely it's almost invisible just because of the angle of view.
And so these are just illustrations again of this is the view from Targo Road where it opens up to the square. So the setback from most views, sorry, that 10th story that Ben was just referring to is barely negligible in terms of visual impact from that any street view. Again, closer up under the northeast corner building, the illustrative proposal indicates quite generous colonnade setbacks, again to maximise amenity and opportunity for outdoor seating, all sorts of different types of specialty retail. And in the heart of the site, looking back north, where we will have the entrance to Coles in the centre of the site, and obviously the supermarket taking pretty much the large majority of the footprint of the site underground, and so that we ensure that all of that public domain is fully accessible with no steps or transitions in height. And then basement parking is then delivered underneath that supermarket level.
So I might just wrap. Yep. So my name's Ben Craig. I'm the planning director who's been working on the project. Yep. So yes, we're aware of the recommendation. I guess that's why we're here today, and we've got everyone to speak. I think it's worthwhile just speaking about the background first. As you heard from the proponent, Musa, the planning proposal was originally lodged in 2015, late 2015, with discussions commencing with council a fair while before that as well. When Musa lodged that original planning proposal, it included, just want to get that site here, it included a small slither of land in the rear, I'll see if I can find it, but also a number of properties on the corner of Targo and Ramsgate. So, and what happened at that time, I think the original planning proposal involved just cut off around about there, so it didn't include this section down here. The council, in response to that, said to Musa, we think there is something you can do here, but we'd like to see a larger consolidated site. So Musa went away and went and through a lot of heartache, I guess, optioned up these other sites, ultimately reached agreement with those parties to option up those sites. He then updated the planning proposal and came back and lodged the updated concept in June 2018. When he negotiated those options on that additional site, he also negotiated with Coles to say to them, I've got a bigger site area now. So I've actually got enough of a dimension to fit a full line supermarket in, if you're open to the idea. Coles at the time were looking for, had been looking for about 10 years for another site, and they could see if they can fit a full line supermarket in here. They could see that it's only about 1 kilometre or 2 away from their existing catchment, so there's no real change to the catchment in terms of where they're servicing. So it was a bit of a no-brainer for Coles to say, yes, we would love to be involved in the project. Hence that marriage around 2017 and the updated planning proposal that was submitted in June 2018. At the time, when we originally lodged in 2018, the tower on the corner of the northeast corner of the site was about 19 stories. And since that time, we went through a number of negotiations with the council, a number of meetings with the design review panel, all of which pointed to and suggested a discomfort with the scale and the massing of the concept. And through about 3 or 4 iterations, that concept has come down steadily to now what we've got is a 9-storey building, predominantly 9 stories with that recessed 10th story on that corner element. And the other elements, the other things that we did as well, I won't bother using it. What else we did is we increased the setback distance and the separation distances from the interface with those townhouses to the west of us. So we increased quite a significant setback to that. We dropped it down a number of stories, and actually along that interface now you'll see that there's a 1-storey level before it then pushes quite an extensive way back beyond ADG requirements to then before the building actually jumps up. So there's a lot of design iteration that went through, and I think what actually transpired, we weren't originally involved in the project. We became involved about 3 years after the original DA, but Musa actually listened to his consultants, listened to Turners, listened to ourselves to say, we actually think you need to drop the massing and scale down from what you want to something that's a little bit more palatable and a little bit more realistic. And I think that's where we've arrived at today. I think what you've got in front of you today is actually a really genuine attempt to deliver a concept that achieves a balance between getting the mass and the floor space that's necessary to make it viable, but also delivering the community benefits that Musa has been so passionate about. So the idea of a public square, the idea of a gathering place for the community is really the brainchild of Musa himself, because he's lived in the area for 35 years. He knows what it needs, and we've helped him develop that idea, I guess, in the concept. So there has been a lot of backing and forth with the council, but we do feel as though we have actually reached a position where we've struck a really good balance. And I think, just bear with me. So, yes, I think what you've got in for is a fairly well considered approach to the site that considers the future context, the current context, and actually balances that with delivering a lot of public benefit to the community. In terms of the motivation and the need for the planning proposal, it's worthwhile just talking you through some of that as well. This diagram here shows you the current zone boundaries under the LPP as they stand at the moment. With B2 running along here, you've got Targo Road, Rocky Point Road, Ramsgate Road, and then you've got R3. So if you were to put a full-line Coles supermarket in this store, then you need that box to enable a full-line Coles to work. If you bring that boundary back to here, because one of the points is, well, the LEP was only adjusted, some less than 5 years ago. So why change it now? There should be a presumption against rezoning the site. The important thing to note is that this concept wasn't around when the LEP rezoning occurred last time, or when all of that work went into the rezoning to create the zone boundary here. Coles weren't on board. Moosa hadn't negotiated the additional sites to actually bring them on board. So that what you've got before you now is actually a proposition that wasn't around when that last LEP rezoning happened. And you've got a proposition now with a full-line supermarket. If you don't rezone it, then this part of the land is a prohibition against Coles. And if Coles don't go in this site, then the site effectively doesn't. The whole concept just doesn't happen.
Economically,
it just doesn't stack up, and you can't actually. So what happens without Coles is you develop potentially in accordance with the LEP at the moment. So what you can see here, Rocky Point Road, this is a section view through the site. Rocky Point Road, the B2 with a max of 2.5 to 1 FSR at the moment, the R3 with a max of 1.5, and you would build in accordance with the LEP controls. So you'll have a shop top housing concept on here with ground floor retail of some description, probably small scale retail, residential on top, and this will be a pure residential concept. No public square at all. The whole thing will just be developed, and you'll have small scale retail on there. And then to show you the key moves, I guess, that have led to the concept now, what you can see, and this tells you what the planning proposal is facilitating, is the idea is that, again, this is the boundary between the current zones. This component of floor space that you would usually put in the centre part of the site, that floor space sort of shifts to the top there, which creates where your taller built form is, the 9 to 10 story tower component we're talking about. This component here shifts to create that mass along here. This is where the townhouses are. And you create this space to create a village square in the centre of the site, which allows you to deliver your public benefit. On top of that, down at the bottom, subterranean is where you've actually got the Coles sitting. So that Coles is 0.7 to 1 of your total FSR of the site. So that floor space, none of that floor space contributes to massing or built form or amenity impacts on the site. This massing on here and this massing on here is basically the redistribution of massing from the centre of the site being remassed at the top to allow you the opportunity to deliver the public benefit. So that just sort of gives you an idea of the key moves, I guess, that allows us to do what we're trying to do. And I think it's important to note, I think one of the key things in the report that were raised in the council report is that we can't put residential apartments here because the transport infrastructure, the road infrastructure just can't support it. It's important to note that under the current controls, you can get 157 apartments on the site. The planning proposal proposes 197, I think. So there's a 40 dwelling difference between the two. And that's because the large bulk of this additional floor space is being taken up by the Coles. It's going to be subterranean. So that just gives you a comparison. So the idea that, well, can't all take it because we're putting all these dwellings here. It's already zoned to allow all these dwellings to occur here. The rezoning is only going to deliver 40 more dwellings plus the Coles, both components of which are intrinsically related to the viability of the scheme and actually providing the ability to deliver the public benefit that Moosa is so passionate about and what I think actually Ramsgate needs. I mean, you've probably walked around Ramsgate today and you can see that it's crying out for something to happen. So if we look at the benefits of the proposed scheme, the public square, which is undeniably the biggest benefit, the through-site links, there's public art concepts that are integrated. If you look closely, there's public art concepts. All of this will be formulated in a VPA. A new 4-line supermarket, which I think is actually a benefit for the local community because there is nowhere to go right now. You heard the gentleman talk about if he needs milk and bread, he actually has to leave the centre to go somewhere else to buy milk and bread. Who would have thought you'd have to do that in a local centre, that you can't even buy milk and bread there? The viability benefits to small business. So not only the businesses within this site, but the businesses along the high street, the businesses opposite Ontario Road, all these other businesses that I think, it's a thoroughfare right now. You drive through there, you hardly stop if you can't find a car park. So all these businesses are potentially struggling. We heard about the closure of the bank. Commonwealth Bank goes. then, really, what are the reasons people got to stop there? This actually brings an anchor tenant into the centre. It has flow-on effects to the viability of these other small business owners, because they can then utilise, because inevitably, whilst they're not strictly meant to do that, people who will use the centre will park in the basement car park there and then be able to go and use the centre and do their shopping. And there'll be spin-off effects to that, all positive. So the other one, next point, was the large-scale underground car park. And ultimately where you get to is going to catalyse further renewal of the centre. So when you read the report, it talks about the fact that this concept doesn't have any strategic merit. And I find that really hard to stomach, to be honest, when I read the report and say that this concept doesn't have any strategic merit. And when you go out and you look at the centre and you walk around, you think, how can a concept like this, with a big anchor tenant, with all these public benefits, delivering a new public square for the community, not have strategic merit? And you look at the regional and district plan. The regional district plan asked you to have strategic merit if you're providing services and social infrastructure to meet the needs of the people. We're going to be putting in a huge public square here. We're going to be putting in a medical centre, public art, all these sort of opportunities for social interaction. We're going to be putting in new businesses that will anchor and have flow-on effects to other businesses. District plan calls for developments that foster healthy, creative and socially connected communities. How can you look at this and the report then says that we don't achieve that? How can you actually look at something like this and say it doesn't foster that? It will help to deliver positive urban renewal to a Ramsgate local centre. Respects heritage. If you look at their report, you look at the heritage comments, the heritage officer actually says this is a good thing, because if you look at this concept, these are the two heritage buildings, and you look at the way we've designed the public space to actually integrate and interplay with heritage. So the report says that there's a site isolation issue on this. I mean, how can you look at that concept and say that we've introduced a laneway here, we've introduced a setting here to have this all interacting with the public square, and say that you're actually isolating the site for development? It's a heritage site, so you're not going to put more development on it, but we're actually opening up the opportunity for it to integrate into the concept. So I must admit, I was a bit surprised when I read some of the elements in the assessment report and the conclusions it arrived at. So I guess in just concluding all of this, I think what you can see is Ramsgate's an important centre for the local community, but unfortunately it's become tired and dated over time. And we've seen that with the closure of businesses. You just walk around there, you can feel that it's tired and dated. People are not wanting to invest in renewing their new small buildings because they need to give a incentive lease clause of 12 months to even get someone in there in the first place. So you've got to outlay hundreds of thousands of dollars to refurbish a unit, refurbish a building. Then you've got to give it away free for a year before you can actually get any rent from it. So that's actually why it's not actually turning over or becoming renewed. There's a lack of an anchor tenant, and that has a significant impact on the viability of the centre. The proponent himself, Musa, has invested significant time, money and effort to amalgamate a very large site here. This opportunity doesn't come round all the time. And he's done that under the direction of council in the past. And he's come back with a concept that we think is a really genuine attempt to revitalise the centre and to ensure the long-term viability of it going into the future. And the current concept has been thoroughly considered, as you've heard Rob talk about. It all started from the premises of a place-based approach. Like, genuinely, the first thing that Musa said is, I want to create something, a place for the centre to have a heart. That was the starting point of all of this, and then everything else just flowed from that. So ultimately, what you've got is a planning proposal that seeks to rezone the site to deliver a new four-line supermarket and 40 additional apartments beyond what the current controls can provide for. And for this, the community gets a brand new public square, a high quality retail precinct, a huge basement car park to service the whole centre, public art. So, I mean, when I look at the deal, I think it's a pretty good deal from a planning proposal point of view. I think the strategic merit is there. And if you look at the draft LSPS, the council actually went out, because if you look at the district plan says that the local centre is somewhere in between Ramsgate Beach and Ramsgate. So it actually put a dot there that was somewhere in between the two. It doesn't, in the middle of nowhere. The draft LSPS, the council deliberately went out and said, actually, no, the local centre isn't there. It's actually at Ramsgate Centre on Rocky Point Road. So they put that in their local strategy. So this responds to all of that. And I just don't, I think this, if we don't find this has strategic merit, I don't know what has strategic merit. And I am very concerned that it's a lost opportunity if you knock it back. That's my concern, is that this opportunity goes, Coles goes and looks for another site somewhere else, the opportunity disappears. And I think that's a real loss for the community. I'll just finish on that.
All right. What do you say about the height, the tower height? Now, I know your comments earlier were that there was some discussions between Musa, the site, and the council, and probably a previous council,
Cobra Council, that's correct.
Where they were talking something in the order of 18, 19 stories.
Yeah, I think that
now you brought it down to 10.
Yep.
Do you think that's still too high?
No, I don't, because I think opposite Ontario Road is 6 stories.
Yeah.
I wonder if you can bring up those visual impact, the actual visual impact ones, Rob.
I'm interested in your comments, the interface between that building on the north side of Targo Road and this one.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to consider. I think Targo Road, when you look at it, is a 6-story building. The LEP at the moment, I think, allows 6 stories. Yeah. I think you've got a proposition here, and the LEP allows 6 stories under the scenario where there's no town square or anything. I think what this scheme is trying to say is that we are the centre of Ramsgate. The centre of Ramsgate needs to be demarcated by a building that's probably of higher order than the other adjacent buildings.
Okay, so you wouldn't consider the centre of Ramsgate being where the intersection hotel is?
No, I wouldn't think so. No. And I would say that because you've got a heritage building here. So if we had the whole site and this didn't have heritage on it, then you probably would look at the opportunity to shift the balance down towards the southeast as opposed to being in the northeast. Right. But you've got a big constraint here with that. And I think when you look at the density of retail stores along here, I think there is quite a good, they're quite fine grained. There's quite a lot of stores along there. And I think it's, you've got a sizable site. So I think it has the capacity to accommodate a taller building. I think putting this development on it like this with the town square creates it as a centre of Ramsgate, I should say. And I think that therefore, when you look at the analysis that I showed before and shifting mass up, because you need to be able to keep that to make it viable. So you shift the mass up. I think that makes it appropriate to have a 10-story building.
10 stories works from your perspective.
Yep, and I think I don't know if you've seen these images, you probably have, but I think what these images actually demonstrate is that 10 stories as a centre, in a local centre, it's not offensive. When you look at it, it doesn't stand out. I must say, when I first came to the project and they had 19 stories, and even when it was 15 stories, I looked at it and I said to Musa, I think it's too high. I think it's too dominant. But when you put it at 10 stories, so this is Ramsgate, so this is the lower section, you can't actually even see the 10-story one behind the edge of that there. When you're travelling along, this is Targo, so that's a 10-story building just there. So I don't actually think it really stands out as though it's grossly incompatible with its context.
What inquiries have you made with Bayside Council with respect to their view of the other side of the road?
We haven't made any approaches to Bayside Council, no.
So can I ask you, do you think that this is probably premature, this proposal, given that we don't have an overall master plan from either council, where both Bayside and Georges River have got together and said the future Ramsgate is going to look like this?
I think if you were to do a master plan for the whole of the centre, you might, and I can't deny that you may end up with a different conclusion. I guess the question that I've got then is how long would it take to realise that different conclusion? Are we talking 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? When does that actually happen? So we could do a master plan for the whole centre. How long is that probably going to take for the two councils to get together and do a master plan for the whole centre? I would argue probably at least 5 to 10 years before you see that happen, after they do all the planning process for the LEPs, draft strategies and all that.
The southern edge would be Torwood Street, and the northern edge would be, I think, just past Targo Road.
Just past Targo Road, yep. So I think but if you look at the time frame to do that, I think you're talking 5-10 years. Then you've got to rely on the fact that someone else is going to amalgamate all these sites. Then that other person's got to then go on a journey that Moose has gone on, which has taken him 5 years to arrive at a conclusion, to sit in front of a panel like this today So I actually think you're probably talking 15 years, probably realistically. And this is what I'm saying, is that 15 years down the track, what's happened to Ramsgate Centre in that time frame without nothing actually occurring there? And I think it dies even further than what it is now. And I think that's a real, like I said, a missed opportunity.
And I'll ask you a hypothetical question with respect to what sort of advertising would you see Coles would want to put on the facade? Can you get one of those perspective drawings? I mean, I know it's just a...
Right, yes, that's a good question. It's a bit of a... So let me see if we can find...
No, we're a long way from that.
We do have a man from Coles. We do have a gentleman from Coles here today.
That's within the site, so that's internal.
That's the internal. I'm just more interested in what it would.
Yeah. I couldn't.
Yeah. So that's.
I imagine there will be
at it from
Targo Road.
From Targo Road.
So indicated.
What about
on that
along
going south, southbound? So up on the rise and then coming into the centre, the northern part of the centre. I mean, what?
I imagine there'd probably be some form of illuminated sign for the centre brand, as you see on normal centre sites, and that illuminated sign would probably, it might be called, Ramsgate whatever, and then it'll have the sign.
I'm familiar with the one at DY where DY
exactly.
Centrals.
Yeah, so I mean that's a sort of one I'm actually from French's Forest, so I'm envisaging the one at DY, which is.
Yeah, so we will imagine there'll be some signage on that northeastern edge.
Probably some.
There'll be some building signage on that corner, and on the sort of Ramsgate Road frontage.
Now, where your finger was, just there, on that, the southern side of it, the interface between that edge and that edge effect on the dwellings which are on the western side. Have you? I know you've addressed the ones on Targo Road, which is the medium density townhouses where you've got the stepping effect. What have you thought about in relation to that other edge, that edge along there?
And also on the eastern side as well, where the interface with the heritage building is. It looks quite sheer at the moment.
Well,
yep. So we'll go Targo first, and then.
So just first to point out that this proposal has gone through and studied the usual shadow impacts and amenity studies to show that none of the adjoining properties are impacted over and above requirements that are allowed in SEP 65. Yeah. Give me a second. No, it's probably easier to talk about this on the envelope plan. Not on that one. As you can see, I'll start with the western edge of the existing townhouses are dotted in that outline profile here.
Yeah.
So they're typically 2-storey here. There's a 1-storey building here, but this was anticipated and also a potential because this is the R3 rezone up to a 4-storey development. But even in its existing situation, there's a 1-storey podium that is built onto the boundary on that edge. That's where the loading dock would occur, where we need the maximum width.
All enclosed, obviously.
All enclosed, yeah. And then 1-storey podium up to the boundary, but then offset to the northern side of that western boundary. And then that transitions in height from 4-storey up to 7-storey with an 8-storey setback on that frontage. Similarly on the southern edge. Yeah, so that distance there is 14 metres across there, so it's in excess of ADG controls.
Yeah.
Similarly on the southern edge building, these are essentially in line with ADG controls on controls for change in zone boundaries. So that would transition to a 4-storey edge here. up to then 6 stories. So there's a continual stepping.
So just to be clear, the ADG says that when you've got a zone boundary in place, you add 3 metres to the separation distance. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and on the Rocky Point Road elevation?
You're talking about this.
Yeah, that's right.
This interface here.
Yes, that particular one.
So this, to lessen the impact of that, we've set the facades on Ramsgate Road back incrementally, as well as away from the western boundary, but incrementally back from the street boundary. So on the facade line of the heritage building, the single level podium is set back 3 metres. And then above that, the 4-storey is set back a further 3 metres. And then the 6-storey is set back a further 3 metres.
I think the important thing to note is what we're seeking now as well is an endorsement to go to Gateway.
Yeah, we know what you're trying to achieve.
If there were conditions or discussions with the department and council about, we have concerns around that, and that we were down to that sort of detail, we don't have a problem with actually going away and looking at that and reshuffling it to make it address concerns that might be raised.
That, again, we understand that this is a rezoning proposal, but you would have to also have an agreed envelope approval as well.
Yeah, so I'd imagine we would prepare a site-specific DCP.
Yeah.
As part of the,
You
in
would have
response
to.
to the gateway determination, and that site-specific DCP would be exhibited with the planning proposal at the time as well.
All right, now I'm going to open up to questions from both John and Michael, so who would like to start?
On a related question with the heritage sites, have there been any approaches to be able to purchase those sites to include as part of the proposal? In that, I think a lot of the concept plans showed the development on that site, but I think development of this site without that is going to be a very different proposition, and I'm just not sure what's going to be left on that heritage site to actually enable something that's going to be consistent with the vision you have.
Lucy, you might be able to answer whether or not you've approached the owners of.
So you might need to come forward.
You come forward. The question?
Speak to some of the owners, but because we didn't proceed and we didn't get answers from council on what direction they were going to take, we didn't know how to approach them, and to what, they ask you first thing, what are you going to offer us? We didn't know what to offer because we didn't know we weren't getting answers. We were getting mixed signals.
You know these people?
Yeah, well, I'm a local. I've been here for 35 years.
Yeah, okay, so
they're actually waiting at the door, but we just had to draw the line somewhere.
I think the important thing to note is that the development along that and of this site, so the dotted red line shows you the boundary of the planning proposal boundary. Yeah. So you've got this site here in the middle, and then you've got the 2 heritage buildings in the corner. This site here in the middle, we've assumed a 6-storey high building, which is in accordance with the current LEP controls.
Currently.
And the heritage buildings themselves, because they're heritage, they're never going to be developed in the first place. So you don't envisage that you're going to get development occurring here. But this here, within our concept, we've allowed to show you how that would be built as a viable development, and it would tap into the basement of this building, of this development as well.
What sort of indicative separation is there between the 2 buildings, and would that southern building in fact have any solar access?
Well, we've done an indicative proposal, so we've shown the plans, even though this isn't part of the planning proposal.
The separation between the 7-storey elements?
So between the 7-storey element, that's 9 metres across there, but the orientation of the plans, there are no living spaces on those facades facing.
On the northern side?
Yes, but there are only 4 apartments on that floor plate, 2 corner apartments.
So one will be facing east, one will be facing west, and this one would have an easterly and westerly aspect as well. So
you familiar with the corner of Grey Street and Princess Highway at Cobra, North Cobra, where you've got the Heritage House in the corner? You've got a tower behind it.
On Princess Highway.
Have you seen that development?
No, I haven't.
The green development, the
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
past
yeah.
the school, but on
Yeah.
where the bus turns, you've got the Heritage House on the corner. And I'm just fearful that you create that scenario, which is probably not a desired outcome. But
Well, I think that scenario is significantly more abrupt than what we're
Yeah,
proposing
it
here.
is.
I think that's I think the 6-storey or more shoulder directly onto the boundary.
Yeah.
Where this has got a 4.5 metre setback to a 4-storey and then further setback.
The other thing is that if you look at the officer's report, the heritage specialists for council actually assessed these works and said that they were satisfied with the interface that was being achieved between the heritage building and this building. I do take your point about the separation distance here, and that is probably something that needs a little bit more thought about how that is resolved. Certainly something that we would be open to having a look at further.
All right, John?
Yeah, I've got a question. Look, the proposal represents a step change up in the centres hierarchy. And I guess I'm interested in to what extent is that justified by the relative accessibility of that centre now and in the future?
So when you say step change, you're saying step change in...
It's becoming a bigger village.
Becoming a bigger... Sorry, village. Yeah, I think it is
a bigger centre.
A bigger centre.
Yeah, and I guess the strategic justification linked back to how accessible that site is, how the extent to which it's a node for local services, the extent to which it's serviced by public transport and so on. Does it justify that step up in the centre's hierarchy?
Well, I think if you look at, it's serviced by a bus line. I admit it's not close to a railway station. I note that, I mean, there are many centres that are at this scale or more that aren't on a railway station or on a bus line. I think when you look at transport planning for public transport, they usually review those in the context of demand, so that they won't plan the buses and make the buses come more frequently until there's actually demand to drive the more frequent bus services. It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, I guess, but that's just the way public transport works in the state. I think you're on a major road, so I don't think there's any problem with having additional bus services along there. When you look at this and you look at it in comparison with the Rocky Point Road site, and you're getting more demand along Rocky Point Road entirely, I think the Darrell East site, sorry, yep. I think you look at those collectively, you start realising there might be a need for a review of public transport by the state government along there. I think in terms of a step change from dwellings, as I mentioned, I don't think it's a step change from dwellings, because I think that the capacity of the LEP controls, as I said, allows for about 157 odd apartments on the site now under current LEP controls, and the proposed controls will deliver, I think, about 197, so it's 40 additional apartments.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe the residential is one element, but the up in activity to do with the commercial activities also together represents a step change in activity as well as in housing.
Yep.
I guess the proposition that I'd be interested in discussing is those sorts of changes to services and infrastructure to respond to a changing status in the centre's hierarchy are usually best done not ad hoc, looking at how an entire area might change rather than one block. And that's where the notion of a long-term master plan for a town centre has value, because it enables one to look at the bus routes, look at pedestrian amenity, look at pedestrian flows at a slightly larger scale than a single block, and look at how that area might evolve into a more significant centre, and look to some of the district connections. And I guess looking at this as the site that you're proposing, I guess, means that you don't have that opportunity right now to look at the longer term infrastructure and services planning. And my question is, how do the benefits of your proposal overcome that lost opportunity for that master planning?
I don't think necessarily it's still a lost opportunity for the master plan to occur. I think you've got a site here that that a proponent has pulled together, and it is a significant site that will deliver catalytic renewal. I think it actually drives renewal of the centre. I think it actually drives the idea of actually there is a need to do a master plan, because actually you're going to have something here that's going to generate a need to go away and look at that. I think without actually doing a master plan, like I said, we could be having this conversation in 15 years' time, and you've lost the opportunity. Would you plan it differently? I think I don't actually know the answer to that, because without actually
To
doing a
me, it's a
master
critical
plan,
question.
would you plan it differently? You might do, but would not. But you may not. If you've got a centre where someone's actually delivered all of this, delivered the village square, delivered all the other stuff on this site, what that then generates is a desire to deliver renewal to the broader centre. So that actually means the master plan that you develop is not just going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. It's actually going to be people who are interested in actually executing it. And I think that if you've got a site this large in scale, it can plug into the master plan quite easily, and you can plan around it, particularly when it's delivering some of the key benefits that you would ultimately be looking to be delivered through a master plan. Is it a better solution to have a master plan done in the first instance and then looking at more comprehensively at the pedestrian flow network and the infrastructure and that? Look, I wouldn't.
Threshold
Yeah,
question.
I would say that if you're looking at it from a theoretical point of view, it probably is a more appropriate way to go about it. But I think what you've got to look at as well is you've got a real opportunity here to deliver something in the centre that will instigate potentially the need to go away and do that review and then deliver the rest of it.
This is not Schofields or Rouse Hill where you've got a blank piece of paper and you can design to your heart's content. You've got to fit in with the local context.
Yep.
So we understand that.
Yep. But I must say, we have looked at...
No, I think it's a pivotal question. Thank you.
Yeah.
May I, just a small matter, can I confirm that there's a liquor land that's going to be part of the Coles development? I noticed that on one of the drawings.
Isn't it?
At the moment, we have it in the scheme. We have it included.
As part of what you've...
Essentially, so if I can explain it, if this is the basement floor and the supermarket is part of it, the liquor land component will sit as sort of ancillary to also in the basement, but ancillary to the...
That is the way of doing these things.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
Currently, that's sort of what it looks like.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
A decision will be taken later today and published on the council's website. Now, can we return to item 4?
I think we've given it plenty of time to have.
Sorry?
We've given it plenty of time to have the report. So
Yes. Please come forward, ma'am. I take it you've now thoroughly read the report.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll get back to you in a second. I'll just go through a few things. If that's okay.
Yep. Okay, so as you can see, the recommendation before you.
Can I, first of all, I'm not confident. Yes, thank you.
You've got my report.
Yes,
so
thank you. I'll just go through some of these points. That's okay. First of all, I'm not confident on answering all of the areas of concern. I really would need to consult with the architect. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware that some of these things hadn't been attended to, because we were, after the last design review meeting, we were given some points on to work on, and I assumed that they'd either be worked on, but then, as I mentioned before, my brother spoke to a town planner who told him just to hold off until he could get a chance to look at it, and unfortunately, no one looked at it.
So this has taken up a considerable amount of time and money from your perspective?
Oh, absolutely. It's gone.
What would you like us to do? At the moment, you're facing a recommendation to refuse your application.
I would like to defer, if you could just defer that decision until at least so if I can talk to my brother about it. He's he's got patients all day today. He's very busy. He's a doctor, and he just can't get away at all. So I'd like to talk to him. I tried to text him a couple of times, but he's not answering.
So hypothetically, how long do you need?
A couple of months, if possible. But can I also mention, there are things that I am confident about, and it's about the amalgamation piece.
Yep.
And I understand it's a huge issue, and there's a couple of other things I can talk about. But the amalgamation piece, I have written to the neighbours so many times.
Have you taken advice on how that's approached?
Yes, absolutely. And also
by a town planner?
Yes, absolutely. And also,
There are some legal tests, that's all.
okay, what do you mean by legal
Well,
tests?
there's a number of cases in the Land Environment Court that suggest how you go approach neighbours and what the format is
Oh, yes.
and what the protocols are
Absolutely.
in order to demonstrate that you've made a bona fide effort to
Absolutely,
consolidate.
and we went through it via a real estate agent as well, and we gave them, a proper proposals as well. So to the point where we felt like we were harassing them because they just didn't want to be contacted anymore. They didn't want to sell 268. If you think, I mean, obviously the obvious choice would have been to try and buy it, but we've tried several times to buy that property. They just will refuse to sell to us. The next thing we knew, about 2 years ago, the people from 266 Railway Parade approached us to see if we wanted to amalgamate with them. So they said they had a option on 268. That's what they told us. So we said, great, we will meet with you. So we met with them, we took them to the architect. We had a discussion with the architect and we said, okay, we're happy to amalgamate the 4 properties together and let's go ahead. But then they pulled out. They didn't want to go ahead. They obviously realised it's a lot more expensive than what they could afford. And they told us that they had an option on 268, that we couldn't purchase that one. So there was nothing we could do about amalgamating. We would have absolutely tried to amalgamate so many times and done it in the right legal way as well. I know my brother handled that. And they have refused several times to sell the property to us. We can't make them sell it to us.
No,
it's impossible.
no,
So we've tried that. The other thing around the height is that I do know that we were going in lower originally, but we were advised by council. Not advised, sorry, that's the wrong word. I'm sorry, I'm not used to, this is my first time here, I'm very nervous.
It's fine. You're doing well.
We were told by council and our architect was told that actually you can go up a little, another floor. So that's why he went up another floor. I mean, we originally weren't going to go up that extra height. So we were just doing it on the consultation with council and that's the way we went. So I can, talk about that. I feel like that we've been told one thing and we've gone and changed a whole lot of things. On the advice, that's the wrong word, on the consultation with council. And we did that. And then we went to the design review panel and it seemed to be an issue at that time. So that's where we've kind of left it. And the only other thing is that I noticed you talk about the actual design, it doesn't fit in with the rest of the area. Well, I was unaware of that. It's totally new to me, and I think that that's something that we can change if we needed to change. I think the architect thought that perhaps those other 268 and those other places alongside of there's about 5 or 6 houses. If they amalgamated, then they would probably look a bit more futuristic as well. I'm not sure. So yeah, I think he was just trying to comply. And just going back to that amalgamation piece, originally, when I met with the town planner and we spoke to her when we were first doing this, she said that 268 can always amalgamate with the other 5 houses and that, if you can get number 3, then that would be the preferred option for you. So anyway, I really appreciate the time that you've allowed me to read this, and I am sorry that we were totally unprepared today, but we weren't given enough time. And I do respectfully ask that if you can defer the decision until we can at least have a look at some of these things and see if we can change them. If that will help us get it across the line, then certainly we would want to make the changes.
All right, let's see if there's any questions.
No.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'll give you this back.
Thank you.
It's all right.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes decision will be taken
Right.
later today.
Thank you.
Published on the
Thank
council website. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the Georges River Local Planning Panel meeting for the 17th of December 2019, the last for 2019. I thank you for your participation and I wish you all a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you.